Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku, and today we're going to do another reading for this live stream episode. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to share the content that we're putting out with some frequency these days too. The beauty of doing these types of readings, in fact, the beauty of these papers that I have been reading is that, if you haven't realized it yet, I'm doing research for something. Curriculum, yes, but something else I'm doing research for. And oftentimes when you seek knowledge, you come across interesting things, interesting items, right? So as I'm doing my research, looking into curriculum building, etc., I come across this paper that actually mentions the book Stolen Legacy 2. And the title stood out to me because as an African scientist and an African-centered person, I'm curious to see what this paper suggests that we do. So, I've read the abstract, and I'm going to read the entire paper with you guys with some commentary as usual. And I want you guys to let me know in the comments section on YouTube, or you can email us your comments or drop it on social media. By the way, if you look at the show on the live stream, even in the playback, you'll see our overlay now has all of our social media handles. So make sure to follow us on all of the mentioned social media platforms. Okay. And so make sure to share the content. Okay. So that's a few things you got to do. Thumbs it up, subscribe, click the bell for any future notifications. Share the content. And as always, leave us comments on what you thought of the paper and our commentary that goes along with it. Okay? So the paper that we're reading today is called Reaffirming African-Centered Scientists' Place in the Paradigm Shift, Stolen Legacy 2. And it's written by, let me get my stuff together here. Is written by Lennell R. Dade of Lincoln University. So just to give you a preview of the paper, the abstracts reads, using research findings from spiritual healing to remote viewing and the limitations of the Newtonian model that characterize science, New Age scientists are working to shift the current paradigm. However, a closer inspection reveals that they are working toward a shift that is not only reminiscent of what Africa has already given to the world, but also of what contemporary African-centered scientists have been working toward recreating/creating. New Age scientists acknowledge neither ancient Africa nor current-day African-centered scientists. This omission has left the story incomplete and for erroneous conclusions to be drawn. As in the past, and documented by James in his book Stolen Legacy, a theft of science is once again occurring. African-centered scientists must move to familiarize themselves with such efforts so that they might take their rightful place in the paradigm shift and help steer it in the proper direction. Interesting abstract there, right? So, let's get into the main reading. It is said that everything old is new again, and how true this is. There is a body of New Age scientists hailing from various professional fields who are collectively challenging the current scientific paradigm, anchoring themselves in the scholarly works of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and bringing even religious scholars from various persuasions They are in a combined interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary endeavor attempting to bring about a paradigm shift. Altogether, these scientists are not only speaking to the findings as are related to research on spiritual healing, remote viewing, extrasensory perception or ESP, and the like, but also to the limitations of the Newtonian model that currently characterize science. Specifically, these scientists speak to the early challenges to religious doctrine made by Copernicus, Galileo, and others. These challenges were not only seen as an affront to religious leaders and the church, but also to God himself. Church officials deemed those who engaged in such challenges as blasphemers, deserving of punishment, and it was during the European Church's Inquisition that many of these early European scientists were silenced, for example, killed or jailed. Arndt et al., right? Arndt and several other people, if you're not familiar with that terminology, in 2005 suggested that Descartes is seen as providing what might be considered the perfect solution to what some have characterized as a power struggle between the church and early European scientists. Descartes promoted a vision with religion maintaining stewardship in relation to the metaphysical sphere and science, the material world, thus allowing religion and science to each have their own territory and dogma. Later, building upon his predecessor's work, Newton added to the newly burgeoning paradigm mathematical precision, and it is this scientific mathematical model that has reigned over what is scientific versus that which is pseudoscientific and or religious up and until today. During this scientific mathematical paradigm, scientists have over the last 300,000 years created 300 years, right, created volumes of theory and research, i.e. dogma. Degreed scholars of initiates who despite the Descartes' attempted separation, are still engaged in battle with the church, and also now engaged in a major internal fight. The contemporary struggle. Scientists versus religious leaders, right? There were still many issues over which the two camps disagreed, and decisions about who would reign as supreme in venues where they both dwelled, for example, schools, right? In the context of the United States of America, for example, the split and ultimate partitioning of the church, for example, the spiritual realm, from the material world has probably reached its highest level through legislation. The separation of church and state has resulted in the church, the spirit, being fundamentally removed from everything, and in turn the legal system, which by the way is also beholden to the scientific paradigm, being appointed as the arbiter between the material world and religion. And thus, with the arm of the law, the tides have turned. Religious leaders, for example God, and their doctrine have been subdued, and scientists and their research now reign supreme. This is a very interesting writing from the author. The author is a psychologist, right, from Lincoln University. And it's a very interesting read so far. Scientists versus scientists. Let me make sure everything sounds good. On the other hand, it looks like the live stream is still running. Okay. So I'm also testing out some settings here. I think my settings were kind of bad. And that's why the live streams were dropping out. So all for now, it looks pretty good. Let's just continue. Scientists versus scientists. The internal fight, as it is scientists against scientists, is much more contentious. The microscope under which it places the scientific mathematical paradigm brings a level of scrutiny to the paradigm and science in general that religious challenges have not been able to achieve. It is as if the paradigm, the field of science, is imploding. New Age scientists are challenging not only what has been presented as scientific fact, but also the paradigm upon which these so-called facts are anchored. For the New Age scientists, the beginning of the fundamental problem that plagues the current paradigm is the Cartesian split that allowed Newton to bring in his mechanical approach to reality. Newton attempted to set in motion a process by which everything material could be measured, thus making everything predictable and controllable, which is how I look at science as well. In fact, that's how I look at life, to be honest. The post-Newtonians went far beyond the separation of the material from the spiritual. These later scientists killed God altogether, inside and outside of science. Speaking of that, I want you guys to go back and listen to an episode of the show I did called The War on God while we're at it. Okay? This new scientific mathematical paradigm directly and along with its newly added connotations, for example, atheism, caused a fundamental shift to occur in how scientists as well as laymen viewed themselves in the material reality, for example, world, universe, and everything in it, right? The paradigm began the new religion, the new God, and has simultaneously aided in and legitimized the exploitation, destruction, and attempted dominance of the earth, the universe, and everything in it, peoples and material included, by those who would be the gatekeepers of science and their adherents. Metaphysical research. New Age scientists have also put forth startling research findings that not only challenge long-standing scientific facts, but also the underlying paradigm itself. Quantum physicists suggest that certain fundamental particles can exist as either an energy wave or particulate matter, creating what is called a dual existence. Quantum physicists further suggest that the observer's expectation influences the behavior of these particles. The observer's expectation influences the behavior of these particles. We complain about this highlight function. I gotta find another program to show these PDFs. And of course, as Braden, by the way, if you're listening to this episode of the podcast on a podcasting app, because we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcasts, etc. We're on all of them. The problem is that I'm reading and I'm sharing my screen. So after you've listened to the episode on your app, you could definitely, if you care to, you could read along with us. And you could leave your comments on YouTube where we're live streaming this presentation. And of course, as Braden in 2007 stated, the interest is not in these minute particles, but in the fact that everything in the universe is made of particles, and thus the implication. It is also worth noting that Braden is one of the theorists who conceptualized existence as a divine matrix of which humans are both a part of and creators of simultaneously. Emoto suggested that water experiences wave fluctuations he calls Haddo. Haddo affects the water quality and shape the water crystals form when frozen. Through experimentation, Emoto showed how positive or negative Haddo can be transmitted to water, affecting its crystallization. When positive words, for example, thank you, were taped to a bottle, the crystallization formed was hexagonal in shape and pleasing to the eye. However, when negative words, for example, you fool, were attached, the crystallization form was distorted and not at all pleasing to the eye. Given that all things have Haddo, researchers then connect such findings to the thoughts of people and the effects on the individual and the universe in general. Now, that's a paper I would have to read that paper to see how it was designed and to see that, you know, their findings are correlated to the hypothesis. So I'm not too sure about that. But there is research that has shown that if you're positive to plants, plants will grow better, right? So there's documented research of things of this nature already. But again, I would like to see, again, being the scientist, I would like to read the paper and see the experimental design before I really comment on that study. Hagelin, a physicist, led a research team in the summer of 1993 investigating the impact of group mediation on the number of violent crimes committed in Washington, D.C. Over 4,000 transcendental mediators from around the world came to the capital area to participate in group transcendental mediation. Results indicated that during the 8-week period in which the study took place, violent crimes decreased by 23%. And then, following the experiment, violent crime levels returned to their normal statistical rates. See again, right? Again, I would have to see the experimental design. I would have to see what controls they use and how they control certain factors. Because who's to say something else wasn't going on in the city at that time, right? If you have 4,000 people in D.C., maybe people will be more afraid of committing crimes when there's 4,000 people in an area, right? Together in an area. Perhaps people, and with 4,000 people brings more police presence and the like. So who's to say that, what really happened had more to do with the fact that there was 4,000 people, more police were around, and so that's why you didn't see as much crime. And as soon as the 4,000 people left, the police dispersed, and the would-be criminals decided, it was safe to commit crimes again. So that's how you have to look at science as well. Whenever they hit you with statistics in the newspapers or some scientific idea that they're pushing in like the newspapers or TV and magazines, you have to sit down and think it all the way through. You see? Numbers can be made to look really nice, right? And that's an example. Like you talk about the fact that there's 4,000 people who came from around the world to the capital area, and they were there for 8 weeks. You would expect that amount of people to draw some police presence, and so maybe the people committing crimes didn't commit as much crime because the block was too hot. Well, it'll be interesting to look to see what happened in the neighboring areas to DC, the immediate neighboring areas. If people just leave DC and start committing crimes in the closer parts of Maryland, for example, that's the kind of stuff I would question. Similarly, Taggart in 2007 reviewed and conducted experimentation on the phenomena of group consciousness. She cited findings from researchers using random event generator, REG machines, that were run during various events with participants who were together engaged in focused attention. Findings suggested multiple minds holding the same intensity thought created some kind of deviation from the norm on the equipment. So multiple minds holding the same intensely felt thought created some kind of deviation from the norm on the equipment. She reported that these devices have been left running in various locations throughout the world. For example, field REG. That's something to look up. And the data are available in relation to 9/11. Taggart reported that the data not only showed unprecedented evidence of group consciousness felt at the same time that the Twin Towers were hit, but then also prior to and after. This was in addition to the machines themselves showing the largest correlation. Researchers concluded that such data are suggestive of a collective global response during the event. during the event, and also an anticipatory one termed a psychokinetic effect a few hours before and then several days after. McTaggart said that the researchers involved are highly respected and independent physicists and have reported their findings in prestigious journals. So that's the thing about science too, right? Which you also have to be careful of. Scientists, their aim in their research is for the research article from the research to be picked up, and they have tiers of journals within different disciplines of science. And you want to get your papers in the top tier journals, right? You want to get your article in top tier journals, but oftentimes you'll be fine with it going to a secondary or tertiary tier journal. The problem is when you start going to the lower tier journals, right? The not as prestigious journals, a lot of papers tend to get through, or at the very least, tend to get submitted for peer review. And I think I told you guys before, I was in a situation where we would try to replicate some of these findings in these papers, and we just couldn't. And that happens a lot, especially with the lower tier journals. But if you're getting in prestigious journals, then you must be in upper tier journals, and so the research must be solid, right? So there's that. The research must be solid, because it won't just go off of name recognition, right? Because they said respected scientists. It has to be, there has to be something going on with the actual work that's been done. Then there is a practitioner by the name of Bartlett who published a book in 2007 in which he described and provided testimonials to the use of touch along with focused intention to heal patients physically, mentally, and spiritually. Bartlett's method involves reaching back in time to healthy states and bringing those states forward into the present moment, achieving amazing transformation. He has led seminars teaching people his method and how to heal themselves. Pardon me. I think I've seen something from Bartlett before. Finally, you know what? Let me just disconnect this thing because it's just a distraction. So I just have to disconnect OBS. I don't know if I'm going to continue with OBS because honestly, it seems to crash too much for me, but it is good for quick recording online. So I might use it just for that, as opposed to my podcasting setup that I have with a mixer and all this, field recording and all that type of stuff. But OBS always crashes for me. I don't know why. Anyway, you guys didn't need to hear that, right? Finally, Braden in 2007 revealed that during the end of the Cold War, the United States and Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, spent great sums of money on studies related to remote viewing. The goal was to see whether psychic methods could be used to surf the matrix and see into distant lands and especially enemy targets. Empaths were trained by the CIA to describe in great detail what they had viewed after focusing their minds on classified locations. Dubbed the Scan by Coordinate Program, SCANATE, it is this research that laid the foundation for similar research that was later conducted on remote viewing at Stanford Research Institute. So, that's a funny thing. There's a movie with George Clooney that I think this might be referencing some of. where they were like trying to, what's the term? They were trying to remote view through animals and stuff like that, if my memory serves me correctly. So, when you think some of this stuff is conspiracy theory and it's stupid and it's just tales for TV and movie, real credible institutions are doing research in this stuff. They might drop it after a while if they find no positive outcomes, but it's something that people look into. We are taught to hear the word conspiracy theories and even the word pseudoscience sometimes. We're taught to hear that and just be turned off by whatever information is coming. But understand that there are people who really do take time to look into this stuff, right? And you could take from that what you will. Check something here. So, right. Science and New Age scientists' persistence. As the current scientific paradigm has failed to explain New Age research findings and is not capable of forwarding such studies, the paradigm has proven to be quite limited and limiting. In addition, the paradigm has proven to be part and parcel of the problems that are faced by humans all over the globe. The problems as are related to the planet that humans inhabit, Earth, as well as the entire universe. Despite the critique and unquestionably strong challenges to the scientific paradigm, scientists are nevertheless resistant to change. And just as in the past when religious leaders utilized their power to silence scientists, scientists are utilizing their power to silence New Age scientists among their ranks. Ironically, it is scientists who are engaging in unscientific behaviors, and surprisingly, behaviors that are contrary to the implicit rules that they have forged and accepted to assist in the forwarding of scientific theory and research. In other words, scientists are working against their own interests of furthering science, and there's truth to that. Richards, in 1979, in an article titled The Ideology of European Dominance, provided an interesting explanation as to why she believes scientists would tenuously hold on to a paradigm that retards its own growth and possibly engage in the slaughtering of their fellow scientists, i.e. New Age scientists. Richards suggests that the current paradigm was used to forward European imperialism and is still used to help maintain world domination by today's Western powers. I absolutely believe that to a certain extent. It is this scientific mathematic paradigm that, under the guise of science, has forwarded Western European cultural superiority as the only and best way to view reality and oneself. Toward resolving the limitations as well as the problems that the scientific mathematical paradigm has caused, New Age scientists have begun to move in a familiar and most logical direction. Although not specifically stated, it appears that New Age scientists are moving in a direction to make whole the split and to remove the research methodological restrictions placed by the Newtonian model. However, if one looks closely, it appears that these New Age scientists are calling for what Africa has already given to the world, a sacred, scientific, paradigmatic perspective. Many of the criticisms of these New Age scientists are uncannily similar to the challenges that have been presented by African-centered scientists, particularly psychologists, over the past several decades. In addition, this movement is similar to the well springs from which African-centered psychological scholars anchor themselves to build the so-called Afrocentric paradigm. And so, again, just as George James, 1954 to 1992, noted nearly 60 years ago in relation to the thrift of African intellectual property by Europeans, Western Europeans are in the process of stealing the intellectual property of African people to help create the current paradigm shift. So, we talked about this recently. Like in the most recent episode, I talked about how they taken Marcus Garveyism, and the work done by the UNIA, and they're applying that to, Garveyism, UNIA in terms of education, and they're applying that philosophy, right, to multicultural education. So now they wanna apply that thinking and that strategy, right, of education, right? They want to apply that to all the children of people of color. And I saw someone post this on Twitter recently too. But anytime you hear people talk about people of color, understand that means that black people are going to come last. So when these Europeans carry out this stealing of the intellectual property of African people to help create this current paradigm shift that the author is talking about, understand that African people will come up last in that paradigm shift. The same people that they steal ideas from will still not be recognized, still not be upheld, and will come in last. So what are we supposed to do with that information? Well, once we understand that, then we need to understand that we need to really focus in on these strategies, these paradigms, these ideologies, because obviously there's something there. If the others want to take it from you, there's something there. Like recently, I was watching some television. I came across like the billiards channel, pool playing, right? And I was showing my kids, and I was explaining how how the game is played and stuff like that. And the thing I had to get across to them is it might be boring to watch people play pool, like rounds and rounds of pool. But if you want to learn some nuances of the game and some tricks of the game, they have commentators calling the games, right? And if you want to learn some nuances and tricks, watch some games sometimes. And this is true of football, this is true of basketball. You could be a good basketball player, but low IQ on a basketball court. Well, how do you even become better, right? You watch the greats do it, and you start to follow what they do. And this is no different than what the Europeans are doing. They watch the greats. They watch the Africans, right? They watch the people who started this stuff. If you're looking at this on YouTube, you'll see in the cover photo, in the thumbnail of this podcast, you'll see the title of the paper and the author, and then you'll look up and you'll see a picture. And that picture is of Imhotep, right? The first African to do it. The one who everyone copies and has copied. And a lot of the methodology for healing people and carrying out scientific investigation and whatnot is from Imhotep. We were the first to do it. Everyone's just copying us now. So if everyone's copying us, what does that tell you that we need to do? We need to be really steadfast in what we've done in our legacy. Speaking of legacy, let's get to the section called Stolen Legacy, Part 2. Undoubtedly, Africa is the origin of life. It is the beginning of all that is known of mankind, and as such, it is the first place to look for guidance on any subject. This is especially true of the subject matter at hand, sacred science. Jackson published an essay in 1939 titled Ethiopia and the Origin of Civilization, where he credits the Ethiopians as giving to the world religion, language, government, science, and most everything else that is associated, even today, with advanced civilization. Quoting Samuel Lang, Jackson in 1939 declared, of certainty, not less than 8,000 or more probably 9,000 or 10,000 years from the present time, And in each case, we find ourselves at this remote date in the presence, not of rude beginnings, but of a civilization already ancient and far advanced. Internalize that. Internalize it. This guy was writing, close to 100 years ago, right? About 80 years ago, right? And he's talking about how 8 and more probably 9 or 10,000 years ago, our ancestors from the continent had advanced civilization that was already ancient. There's greater lands, greater histories to fight over than America. That's all I'll say about that. There's greater land with greater history for you to fight over. There's land that you actually built and had a history on that makes more sense to fight for. As evidence of their travels is abundant, Jackson suggested that the Ethiopians civilized the world. Traces of Ethiopian civilization can be found in the religions, languages, and many other aspects of a multitude of societies throughout the world. Kemet, the daughter of Ethiopia, has been written about extensively. And that reminds me, in the Rastafarian tradition, Ethiopia is still upheld. But I find through a lot of other African groups within the larger African group, Ethiopia is kind of forgotten, pushed to the side. And everyone talks about Kemet, right? But if you look at the pyramids that everyone talks about in Egypt or Kemet, the prototype for those things came from Ethiopia. Right? There's a definite movement of people, right? And you could see we were doing works as we moved. And then by the time we got to Kemet, that's when we had this great civilization. But these other lands need to be respected as well. Kemet, the daughter of Ethiopia, has been written about extensively. Shwala de Lubitz, author of Sacred Science, 1961, and The Temple in Man, 1977, illustrate in these works both the deep spiritual understanding of the Kemetians and their ability to manifest this understanding on a material level. In Sacred Science, Shwala discussed the truly spiritual nature of everything that was Kemetian. It is in this book that he documented the inexplicable nature of the sacred and the secular. He also documented, according to the Kemetians, the necessary presence of spirit for continued growth and development in every aspect of society or civilization. You have to have a necessary spirit. And I think our people are lacking the spirit. There's a few of us who have it. I think the majority of us don't. And that's a problem why we don't have a lot of continued growth. That's why things are so slow. Right? A lot of us are still looking for someone to hand out liberation, to hand out some type of freedom that will allow you to grow. No, you have to have that in your spirit. Right? The temple in mind represents the pinnacle material expression of this sacred science. It is the ultimate illustration of the manifestation of sacred science. In the context of 100 and something odd pages, Shwala was able to explain in an intricate detail the material manifestation in man and in architecture and the spiritual interconnection all at once. It is a monumental accomplishment both for the Kemetians, representing the highest understanding of spirit dwelling in the material world, and also for Shwala to interpret. Kemet has Kemet, as taught by its mother, embodied the sacred scientific paradigm completely and on every level. Kemet, as taught by its mother, embodied the sacred scientific paradigm completely and on every level. Sacred science across the continent. Similar philosophical systems are common throughout the continent of Africa. Just across the way, specifically in West Africa, Mbiti has written several books speaking to African cosmology and ethos. Mbiti's work has been the underlying influence in the development of a philosophical backdrop that is used to anchor African-centered psychology. In a chapter entitled African Philosophy, Foundations for Black Psychology, Nobles in 1991 shared the two components on African ethos as adapted in part from Mbiti: oneness with nature and survival of the group. Oneness with nature expresses the belief that all which exists share connection. This includes human beings, animals, plants, and all that exists in the physical world and the spiritual world. A connection is shared because all that exists emanate from the same source, the same divine source. This means that the core, the essence of everything in existence is divine. It is this divine source that provides the energy within all that allows for their physical manifestation and or spiritual existence. Thus, not only is all that is physical or spiritual existence connected, but also everything is then connected to the divine source, creating a oneness. Understanding of the oneness of nature leads to an understanding of the survival of the group. For if everything in existence emanates from the same source and is connected to this source, creating interconnectedness, then everything is also interdependent. Furthermore, if an interconnectedness and interdependence is shared between everything, then so too is survival. This means that all things in the universe, in existence, example, material and spiritual, have in common their survival. Besides these two major tenets, there are many other aspects of the universal order that have been discussed, and there is much more that is still open to philosophical consideration. Nevertheless, the point being made is that there is an order to the universe, one universal order, one divine order. Again, there is a sacred scientific paradigm that underlies all of existence. So, personally speaking, a lot of what I just read just then kind of mirrors my personal belief. And I won't get deep into my personal belief, but my personal belief is an African-centered one. I believe in the ancestors that were energy, that passed down energy to this vessel that I'm in right now. I believe we're interconnected. I believe their experiences are my experiences. And my experiences will be, whoever comes after me, right? And I believe that you folks listening who are Africans are tied to me, and that we as Africans have a oneness, and that's the divine origins of the African. That's along the lines of my belief, right? Before I continue, let's head into a little station ID.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
By the way, if you didn't know, the Bit of Medicine podcast has a Cash App. A little Cash App to support the show, or you can put it, you can actually leave a note. You can put it towards the curriculum. Either is fine by me. Okay. So let's get back to the reading. Kemet has also been used as part of the underpinnings for the African-centered model, i.e., the sacred scientific paradigm. In a chapter titled The Kemetic Origins of Psychology, Akbar, in 1994, traced the origins and the meaning of the word psychology to ancient Kemet. The word psychology is said to be Greek in origin. Psyche is said to mean soul, making the meaning of psychology really the study of the soul. But as a result of the Cartesian split and the Newtonian model, the soul falls under the domain of religion, and according to accepted scientific methods, cannot be measured, thus defying prediction and control. This means if psychology is to be a science, it cannot study the soul, the metaphysical realm. To comply, psychology became the study of mind, behavior, and effect, thus making it a scientific field. Despite this redefinition, Akbar in 94 reported that for the Greeks, Psyche was associated with one of their goddesses. He further suggested that the Greeks came to know Psyche through two Kemetic words, Su and Ke, meaning she-soul, and that these two Kemetic words, when combined, are connected to the Kemetic word Sakhu, which means understanding, the illuminator, the eye, and the soul of the being, that which inspires. Akbar, along with many other African-centered psychologists, have been part of the vanguard in returning the psyche to psychology and in expanding the research methodology that psychologists use to create a natural or humanistic psychology. Akbar in 85 has been quoted as saying that there is a need to bring together the materialism of the West with the spirituality of the East. In other words, based on ancient Kemet, Akbar is calling for a return to the sacred scientific paradigm. Similarly, Nobles has devoted his professional career towards this same goal. His most recent book, titled Seeking the Sakhu, Foundational Writings for an African Psychology in 2006, contains selected pieces of his life's work underscoring the place that spirituality has in psychology in science. These African-centered psychologists have also been in the vanguard of engaging in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary efforts towards shifting the paradigm and returning the sacred aspect of science. For example, Clark, McGee, Nobles, and Weems, aka Akbar, in 1975, published a now seminal piece titled Voodoo or IQ, an introduction to African psychology. Now that sounds like it could be an interesting read. Again, this is where I show you when you do study, study begets more study. Right? And you find a lot of interesting things along the way. It is in the context of this piece that they not only cover major topics across the field of psychology, for example, intelligence, personality, and the self, but also incorporated biology, for example, melanin and the central nervous system. Looking at various forms of ESP, for example, psychokinesis and precognition. These authors, as well as other African-centered psychologists, have also welcomed the input from scientists in other fields, like anthropologists, historians, and from those of various clothes, for example, Islam, Haifa, Christianity, in their endeavor to rebirth this sacred scientific paradigm. So, like, when we talk about the curriculum. The curriculum is not religious in any way, but the curriculum is scientific. And when you hear scientific, you might just be thinking math, science. No, it's holistic in that it's science as it connects to the history, as it connects to anthropology, right? As it connects to language, So what we're working on here, what we're working towards, is something that's holistic, that includes, a lot of everything else. And even though it might not be fundamentally, in any way religious, I'm sure you will find your way to understanding your existence through this curriculum. However, these factors seem to receive only scant, if any, mention by these so-called New Age scientists. The New Age scientists typically start their discourse in the middle of the story, that is, in the context of Europe, with the fight between scientists and religion. Some do include a cursory mention and or short review of Egypt alone, and even the use of the more current name as opposed to Kemet bespeaks the problem. But quickly find their way to European soil to anchor most of the discussion in that context. They leave the beginning of the story untold, resulting in an erroneous conclusion. In addition, never is there mention of Afrocentricity, Afri-centricity, Africanist, Africanity, blackness, or the like. African-centered scientists have been written out of the paradigm shift that not only have they steadily moved to create, but also their resurrection and reinterpretation of ancient sacred science are ignored. It behooves African-centered humanistic psychologists to familiarize themselves with the movements of the New Age scientists. For as Richards in 1979 suggested, before African people have a chance to fully explore, synthesize, and appreciate their creations, they are retooled, remodeled, and sold to even Africans themselves. And while the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of people of African ancestry, i.e. the world, require this shift, it must be anchored, conceptualized, and materialized properly. Reading a part of that reminded me of Dr. John Henrik Clarke when he spoke of African history or African religious history, how the folks are just selling you African stories and making it seem like it's Europeans that they're talking about. We see that here again. So the future movement of African-centered scientists. African-centered scientists have worked tirelessly to create theories and measures that are relevant to the African people. At times, their work has also been squarely directed at challenging the current scientific paradigm, and at other times, their work has done so indirectly. However, the problem is that there has not been an appreciation for the fullness or completeness of the paradigm that was being regenerated and also in some ways probably extended. In addition, some of the theorizing has resulted in a splitting, a separation of the universal order from itself, dichotomization of the universal order. This has led to the promotion of two competing universal orders when, of course, there can be only one universal order. The major task that lies ahead for the African-centered scientists is to clearly establish the paradigmatic tenet that there is only one order to the universe, and as Akbar in 1991 would say, either one is living in order or disorder, as demonstrated through their cosmology and worldview. Not only has Baldwin suggested that Black versus African cease, but it is clear that the Afrocentricity versus Eurocentricity should also cease. On the level of universal divine law, there can be only one truth, and it is the so-called Afrocentric paradigm. What has been philosophized about as Afrocentric is in fact universal in keeping with the peoples of the universe and with universal order. It should also be added that there is only one gene pool from which all humanity sprung, and the landmass that is currently called Africa is the birthplace of this wellspring. So here's where I'm going to have to pause for a second. I saw it coming a few lines earlier, maybe a few paragraphs earlier even, right? And I was waiting to see if this is where this author was going to go. Let me just hit this one last spot, take a sip of water, and I'll come back with my comment.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Just a little reminder of the Cash App, $BitterMeds, BITTERMEDZ. Make sure to donate to the show, donate to the curriculum. Either one is fine. In addition, while you're here, if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, so that you can be notified for when we go live or when we, produce a new episode. And last but not least, make sure to share the content, dialogue with us. I usually throw some call to action question throughout the episode. Make sure to go into the comment section, talk to us about it. What do you think of this reading that we're doing? What do you think of our commentary along the way? How do you think it's useful to you and to others like us, right? So again, Cash App, Bitter Meds. Follow us on social media. If you're on YouTube, you can see our social media right around this paper that we're reading. So this author has been building up to this issue that I have. Again, being Afrocentric or African-centered, I'm not too involved or too caring about other groups. I'll be honest with you. And in fact, the problem that we have is too many Africans think about everyone else and start talking along these lines of being Africa is the birthplace and the wellspring, and we are the first people, and everyone comes out of us. Dude, stay on task. Stay on task. When y'all do that, Africa is the birthplace for everyone else, that's how you get Charlize Theron. Right? Being born in Africa and considering herself just as African as any one of us. In fact, she considers herself more African than those of us born in the diaspora. I briefly saw a Twitter post today. It was someone on my Twitter feed responding to something. I don't know if it was Xbox the Mark or whatever. But there's this white boy in South Africa, one of these boys, talking about they were the first Africans, that Africa was named after the Romans, which is not true, and that, they've done more for Africa than any African tribe, yada, yada, yada. And that's because we include these motherfuckers too much. We start to give them this thinking that, we came from Africa too. We have ownership in Africa. And we do a lot of that shit. We got to stop that. Africa is the birthplace of Africans. Africa is for the African. The black man. Right? It's the wellspring of us. We are Africa's creation. And like I've been saying for the past few weeks, we are Africa's creators as well, along with those on the continent. We have to make Africa a power. Once Africa is strong, then we can walk around strong. But once you start opening the gates of Africa to every goddamn other race and ethnicity, then Africa will be a lost cause for us. As far as we're concerned, these other folks are from Europe and Asia. Do you understand? Go through life thinking these other folks are from Europe and Asia. And you look like me and you, black people. We are the ones from Africa. We are her creations. And one day we need to return and be her creators. Again, along with those who look like us on the continent. So let's read the last piece here. So he says, I'll just reread the last part. What has been philosophized about as Afrocentric is in fact universal, in keeping with the peoples of the universe and with universal order. It should also be added that there is only one gene pool from which all of humanity sprung, and the landmass that is currently called Africa is the birthplace of this wellspring. And just as comment on that too, there's evidence that Europeans are mixed with Neanderthals, and we aren't. So are they really from the same place we're from? Are they really of the same gene pool that we're from? Question. And recognition of these factors will ultimately allow for the beginning of the story to be told, and then for its proper unfolding to occur, and most importantly, for African-centered scientists to fulfill their destiny, as Akbar in 1995 suggested, authors of a paradigm shift. So that's the end of the paper, but I want to add one thing that you would notice. Because of how academia is set up, most of the black folks in academia, like the ones who are doing, say, science and research and publishing articles and stuff like that, most of those people are frankly integrationists. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago, but the integration is largely because the gauntlet that they had to go through to receive that education, they had to be mixed in and super connected to a bunch of white folks. I've never talked to him about it directly, but if you listen to Onita Say's podcast, you'll hear him talk about he was going to do a PhD and he was going to do it on how stars are created. But the white folks told him that, well, we don't understand how stars are created. Right? And so they kind of dissuaded him from doing that as his thesis. But listen to the story. White folks had to tell him, and I don't know for sure, maybe that's why he didn't continue. Or maybe he did and he just doesn't, utilize it or whatever. But the idea is, when you reach those levels of actually being a researcher, PhD and whatnot, right? And to be honest, even as a master's student, you have to be kind of around these folks all the time. 9 times out of 10, you're the person who you're working with in the lab to get your thesis work done is one of these other folks. And so the whole thing, being in these Eurocentric schools, you're immersed in like Eurasians, and even if you aren't somehow, right? Even if you aren't somehow, you still have to practice some level of integration to get through it. You rarely see like a black nationalist type person in those programs. And if you do, they're like a whispered type of black nationalist. They'll talk the talk around, black folks, but then they got to go and play the game just to get through this program. So when you see a lot of these kind of publications from these guys, expect there to be some little bit of integration in the writing, which is what this guy, I think it's a guy, right? which is what this guy, essentially comes to by the end of the paper. Lennell R. Dade. Lennell could be a woman, I'm not sure. But this is the kind of stuff that they kind of come to. And we don't need that. We don't even need to think that way. Right? We need to have our mind on the continent and the continent on our mind. We need to think like Garvey said, Africa is for the African. That's it. Like Peter Tarr said, if you're a black man, you're an African. That's it. So, it's a decent paper, integrationist, accommodationist, but the idea, I think, you can glean a good, positive idea from it. The paradigm shift is really talking about, being accepted by white folks in science more, which I don't really care for. But the idea is that we do need to study, as scientists especially, and those of you who endeavor to become citizen scientists, we do need to go back and look at Sankofa, right? To go back and bring forward. We do need to go back and bring forward what we did in the past. Right? What did we do in the past? I know when you speak scientists and science nowadays, a lot of people look at, the guys who built like the street sign, or who built the filament and the light bulb, and that's important too, no doubt. No doubt. But we got to go back further, right? And we got to go back. This is why reading is so important. We got to go back and read and research what we've done. And build upon what we've done in the past too, right? Use it to raise our self-esteem, to raise our knowledge levels, and to get active and actually do stuff that matters now. You can help yourselves and help all of our children and our people by helping to build this curriculum. Like I said, you could talk about organizing all you want, but if you really ain't teaching your people nothing, then the organizing doesn't do much. Basically, organizing just grabs the adults. We need to start grabbing our people from children. Let's give them a curriculum that centers them around Africa, that centers them on problem-solving African problems, creating African solutions for African problems. All right, that's been this episode. I might jump on later today or tomorrow, who knows? But that's been this episode of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have followed along with the things I've asked you to do, like, share, subscribe, etc. Till next time, peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.